The doubling effect of COVID-19 cases continues in South Korea, with the country already confirming more than 70,000 cases as of 9 p.m. yesterday. Experts say the daily tally will surpass 100,000 any day now. Seoul's Foreign Minister Park Jin holds talks with his Japanese counterpart on ways to improve ties and possibly arrange a summit. This comes after more than 4.5 years since a top South Korean diplomat last visited the country. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol will be meeting with U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen at his office this afternoon. This comes as Yellen hinted about possible additional sanctions on North Korea the day before.
Good morning and welcome to New Day at Arirang. South Korea's rapid increase in daily COVID-19 cases is alarming, to say the least. As of 9 p.m. on Monday, over 70,000 new infections were reported.
The exact figure, 70,497, is roughly 3 times more than what was logged the same time the day before. This is also double the figure from exactly a week ago, an increase rate which has been constant for the past couple of weeks. And if the trend continues, by early next month, the country could see around 280,000 daily cases, according to the KDCA. Authorities had originally expected and warned of an increase in case numbers in the fall or winter. But with COVID-19 figures doubling by the week now, officials have said it is now too difficult to determine for sure when the current resurgence will peak.
President Yoon Suk-yeol is set to meet U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Tuesday. She's in Seoul as part of her Indo-Pacific tour following the G20 meeting in Bali and will be meeting with key finance officials in the country. According to South Korea's top office, ways to deal with economic conditions as well as inflation will likely top the agenda. The visiting official is also expected to meet with the nation's finance chief and the head of the central bank. On Monday, Yellen spoke out on North Korea's weapons testing, saying that any nuclear test by the regime would be seen as very provocative. She added that Washington has further sanctions that can be adopted against Pyongyang. Seoul's foreign minister held talks with his Japanese counterpart on ways to improve ties and possibly arrange a summit. This is the first time in over 4.5 years a South Korean top diplomat has visited the country. Kim Dami has the details.
South Korea is speeding up its efforts to improve the icy bilateral ties with Japan, with TAR's a top diplomat in Tokyo for the first time in nearly 5 years. During their first in-person talks on Monday, South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin and his Japanese counterpart Yoshimasa Hayashi discussed mutual interests and put their heads together on ways to pursue a future-oriented relationship. And that included the issue of compensation for the Koreans Japan subjected to wartime forced labor. While the two sides agreed on the need for resolving the matter at an early date, Park pledged to what he could do so that there are desirable solutions before the assets of related Japanese firms are liquidated.
There are many good opinions coming out. We will explain this situation to Japan and put together all our wisdom to find the most reasonable solution.
Revitalizing people-to-people exchanges also topped Monday's talk, including a visa waiver between the two countries. The two diplomats further agreed to deal firmly with North Korea's latest military ambitions and beef up cooperation with the U.S. in pursuit of diplomatic solutions. Hopes are also high that Park's 3-day visit could include a sit-down with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, which could pave the way for the first summit between the current leaders of the two countries. Park also plans to pay respects to Japan's late former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
Housing stability and tackling the energy crisis were at the center of the discussion at the nation's top office. This comes as President Yoon continues to receive briefings from his cabinet members. Yoon Jung-min brings the highlight from that session.
Providing more homes to meet rising demand. The key housing policy under the new Yoon administration is to provide at least 2.5 million in urban areas and around key transportation hubs nationwide. Details will be unveiled next month.
The Land Ministry will put all-out efforts to weather the economic crisis and stabilize people's livelihoods.
To ease the debt burden of the lower income bracket, the government will shift loans with the high interest rates to lower ones and switch to fixed-rate home mortgage loans. Various environmental assessments will be integrated to shorten the approval time needed for new buildings.
President Yoon asked his land minister to prioritize housing stabilization and housing welfare, which are key to people's livelihoods.
The Land Ministry aims to help more Korean businesses tap into overseas infrastructure markets, branding it as K-Smart Infra, and eyeing new opportunities in the Middle East, Ukraine, and Iraq. It'll also push ahead with commercializing Level 3 autonomous cars by the year's end and those of Level 4 by 2027. In 3 years' time, South Korea is looking at the use of a full-blown urban air mobility. President Yoon was also briefed on ways to tackle the energy challenge facing the entire world. His Environment Ministry's plan is to make the most out of nuclear power, reallocate carbon credits among industries, and tackle environment pollution by cutting ultra-fine dust levels by 30% within the next 5 years. To do so, more incentives will be provided when there is a shift to clean fuel or scrapping of old diesel vehicles. How to fight the affordable housing and energy crises at once. That was what Monday's policy briefings were all about here at the presidential office, while for the rest of the week, the president will focus on the nation's foreign policy, security, and national defense. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The ruling party and the government held back-to-back meetings on ways to fight inflation and boost the economy. They've agreed to cut taxes for businesses, company employees, and homeowners. Lee Kyung-eun outlines what was discussed.
Everything is becoming more expensive these days, but salaries aren't going up. With the people in South Korea hit hard by rising inflation and interest rates, the ruling People Power Party and the government have agreed to a major revision to the taxation scheme.
Despite a decline in tax revenues, we will put all our efforts into protecting people in the low-income brackets, as well as small business owners, hoping to ease the burden they feel.
For one, easing the excessive real estate taxes on homeowners put in place during the previous administration. On Sunday, the party and the government agreed to allow homeowners to switch to a fixed-rate mortgage if their home is worth less than 400 million won, or around $300,000, starting in September. There'll be revisions to the income tax scheme for corporate workers for the first time in 15 years, too.
We called for an expansion to the scope of those belonging to low-income brackets so that more workers are eligible for tax benefits.
Also, revisions are underway to ease the burden of eating out for corporate workers. Currently, 100,000 Korean won, or roughly $80 from a worker's pay, is classed as business meal allowance and is exempt from taxation. But a new scheme could increase that allowance by twofold. In the meantime, the government would also push for lowering corporation tax to facilitate economic growth in the long term.
The goal of these revisions is to enhance corporate tax competitiveness, independence, and creativity.
The goal is to meet the standards of other OECD countries, most likely from the current 25% to 22%. And the government will lower inheritance tax for small and mid-sized companies to ensure smoother family businesses. Based on what's been discussed for the past 2 days, the Finance Ministry will announce the finalized measures on Thursday. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
It's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. Cases of monkeypox across the globe have seen a rapid increase. According to the U.S. CDC, more than 12,500 cases have been confirmed in 68 countries. Many countries, in response, have been ramping up their supply of vaccines to fight the virus. However, some health experts are saying it's too late to respond now.
Is that really true, and are we facing another potential global health crisis? For more, we have Michael Toole, a professor at Burnet Institute, joining us from Australia with us today. Good morning, Professor Toole. It's lovely to see you again.
Good morning from a very cold Melbourne.
Wow, well, it's very hot here in Seoul. And, well, my first question to you, Professor. Well, first of all, health officials globally, they're saying that the confirmed cases that we're seeing right now are just the tip of the iceberg. So that's really worrying, but also vague. So could you elaborate on what the officials are really saying by this in terms of what the situation is now or how it might possibly unfold?
Yes, well, first of all, official cases are still rising, particularly in Europe and North America. But 68 countries around the world, including South Korea, have reported cases. Now, this may be an underestimate for a couple of reasons. Like any infectious disease, the symptoms vary from mild to very severe. And in those cases that are mild, the symptoms may just be fever and headache, like a viral illness, and those people may not notice a rash. Now, the other reason, which may be the main reason, is that around 95% of cases of monkeypox outside of Africa have been men who have sex with men. Now, this is not a sexually transmitted disease, but of course, in intimate relationships, there is skin-to-skin contact, and that is how the virus is spread. Now, there may be some people, men mainly, who may be afraid to reveal that they have the disease, and they may fear discrimination, just like in the early days of the HIV pandemic, when there was a lot of discrimination against men who have sex with men. So they're the two main reasons.
Right, and the WHO is considering calling the outbreak a global health threat. People are already weary from the prolonged COVID-19 pandemic. Is this move by the WHO necessary, and what are the implications if this is to happen?
Yes, the WHO expert committee on monkeypox will meet on Thursday. I can't second guess their decision, but they will probably be looking at the impact of this outbreak on health systems. And because monkeypox is, this strain of monkeypox is quite mild, there have been very few people in hospital. So unlike COVID, it's not likely so far to disrupt health systems, particularly as most cases are in wealthy countries. But on the other hand, if cases continue to increase, the spread may be even wider, and it may affect more low-income countries. That hasn't happened, but a case has been reported in India. So they'll be balancing up those different issues. If there is a declaration of a health emergency of global concern, that will free up resources to those countries that are struggling or might struggle in the future to obtain vaccines and to have good surveillance and contact tracing. Because those three things are the main weapons we have against monkeypox: good surveillance, contact tracing, and what we call ring vaccination. So that's vaccination of contacts. It's very unlikely there will be population vaccination campaigns.
And of course, what is of global concern right now, Professor Toole, is the resurgence of COVID-19 cases that we're seeing due to the more transmissible variants such as BA4 and BA5. And well, we've really been dreading this kind of situation. And well, how are global authorities preparing to respond to this?
To COVID or to monkeypox?
To COVID.
COVID. I think the tools that we have to prevent the spread of COVID have not changed, except that we now have, at least in wealthy countries, access to vaccines. And vaccines are still the number one tool that we have. And it's very important that people get their third dose booster, and for those who are eligible, their fourth dose. That will certainly reduce the chance of you getting severe illness and ending up in hospital and or dying. Now, in addition, we know that masks work. Indoor mask wearing is very protective. at a population level around 70% effective in reducing transmission, so long as they are good quality masks. The other issue that we haven't addressed in many countries is improving indoor ventilation. And this is a medium to long-term measure that I think every country in the world has to address. And that means, first of all, improving ventilation in hospitals, schools, and that's a government responsibility, but also businesses, bars, retail stores, gyms. These all need to improve their ventilation, and that will be the most effective long-term measure to prevent the spread of respiratory viruses. And let's keep in mind that there may be new, more severe variants of COVID, and after that, there may be a new pandemic virus. So we need to think about the immediate response and the longer-term prevention and preparedness measures.
That's right, Professor Toole. Also, tying to what you have just explained to us about COVID, monkeypox, as you said, this particular strain is not as dangerous, so you're not particularly worried. But what we learned from this COVID-19 pandemic is that the virus evolves, right? So monkeypox virus could also evolve to be more transmissible or even more dangerous to certain patients. Is that a possibility that the global society need to sort of embrace the possibility for?
Absolutely. There are several strains of monkeypox. The most severe is in Central Africa. This outbreak came from West Africa, where there are 3 different strains. Now, Portugal's National Institute of Health, which was the first Western institute to isolate this virus, has found there's been a massive mutation since 2019, when there was an outbreak in Nigeria. Now, fortunately, it's the milder version, but it spreads more easily. Now, this institute estimates that in those 3 years since 2019, there have been 12 times as many mutations as you would expect. Normally 1 or 2 mutations a year, but now it's 50 mutations in 3 years. Now, that process, fortunately, it's mild. There've only been 3 deaths reported since early May, and those 3 were all in Western Africa. So there've been no deaths outside. But if it does become more severe, that will, of course, like COVID, mean a greater stress on our health system, particularly hospitals. The treatment for monkeypox is basically symptomatic. You treat the pain. But in severe cases, you may need to give antivirals, and that needs hospital care.
I see, Professor. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so this is where we'll have to leave the conversation. But thank you so much. It's an honour always speaking with you, and keep warm in Melbourne.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And that wraps up the first half of New Day at Arirang, but do stick around because coming in the second half,
we speak to experts on how South Korea's capital, Seoul, became Time Magazine's smartest city in the world and what the city needs to do to keep this going and improve on its current reputation. So stay tuned.
South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and introduced a Korean New Day. Korean survivor of Japan's wartime slavery met with
extraordinary climate crisis and pledged to work with the EU to tackle the challenge.
The objective of its North Korea policy is
protesters gathering across the country to peacefully demand an end to hate and violence.
Arirang, what matters?
Feel so good right now. Maybe I had a drink or 2, but this somehow feels like it's forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good, but right now, maybe this is forever.
Welcome back to New Day at Arirang. Merciless heat has scorched many parts of Europe, with Britain and France issuing their highest level alerts as temperatures skirt record-breaking levels.
Meanwhile, wildfires continue to rage in Western Europe, forcing thousands to flee their homes. Kim Yo-sun has more.
The UK's first ever red warning for extreme heat has been issued for the heart of England throughout Monday and Tuesday. This comes as temperatures up to about 41 degrees Celsius baked an area from London all the way north to Manchester and York, and breaking the previous record of 38.7 degrees set in 2019. The government urged people to work from home, while many schools and doctors' offices shut their doors. Rail services were limited over fears the tracks would buckle, and flights at Britain's largest airbase were halted. France also struggled to cope with scorching heat as extreme temperatures continued to hit the country as well.
We are drinking a lot because it's super hot, and we try to stay in the shade because with the sun, it's hard. The heat, it's too much.
To this end, the French authorities also issued its highest possible alert level along its Atlantic coast, warning of a, quote, heat apocalypse. The heat has been detrimental in other areas of Europe, with rapidly spreading wildfires in France, as well as Spain and Portugal, leading to mass evacuations. Against this backdrop, much of Europe is experiencing a drought as a winter-spring precipitation deficit was worsened by early heat waves. Studies show this could lead to a severe soil moisture deficit as well as a vegetation stress. A drought emergency has been declared in 5 Italian regions, while insufficient water availability has led to multiple use restrictions across municipalities. Similar measures to restrict water use have also been put in place in France. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has issued a dire warning to leaders from 40 countries as they gathered in Berlin to discuss climate change response measures. Guterres warned that humanity was opting for collective suicide through inaction, especially as many parts of the world are experiencing extreme weather conditions. European leaders failed to fulfill their climate targets, while German Chancellor Olaf Scholz warned of the global re-emergence of fossil fuel energy due to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. He emphasised that Germany seeks to end its dependency on Russian gas, adding that his country will continue to work towards carbon neutrality by 2045.
South Korea is set to join another round of IPEF negotiations later this month. The U.S. Department of Commerce and USTR will hold the ministerial level talks online from July 26 to 27, where member countries will set the scope and agenda for future negotiations. Back in May, U.S. President Joe Biden kicked off the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity to boost the economy and security alliance of countries in the region. As one of the 14 founding members, South Korea has been actively forming task forces to bolster cooperation in supply chains and advanced technology. At the world's largest military air show, South Korea's Black Eagle won top awards. They showed off their aerobatic flight skills using a domestically developed advanced trainer jet model. Bae Eun-ji turns the spotlight to the T-50s.
South Korean fighter planes loop and spin across the sky to create the shape of the Korean flag. Spectators cheer as the planes also leave trails in the shape of a heart and an arrow going straight through it. They're the Black Eagles, an air display team from the South Korean Air Force. For 4 days from last Friday, the team took part in the Royal International Air Tattoo, or RIAT, the world's biggest air show held in England.
I feel very honored to take part in the world's biggest air show. Our team will be showing the amazing skills that the South Korean fighter pilots have and the power of our country's T-50 jets to all those who gathered here from all over the world.
The Black Eagles also demonstrated a formation where they scattered upwards in the air, leaving blue and red trails. One spectator and a fan of the Black Eagles says this is something that no other team has shown.
And I do like that formation they break where they do the rolls as well. I can't remember what that's called, but that's a really unique one. I've not seen someone do that before.
The team pulled off a total of 24 different air maneuvers during its performance and won the King Hussein Memorial Sword for the best overall flying demonstration among all teams from 34 countries. The team was also given the As the Crow Flies trophy for the best flying demonstration as judged by the members of the Friends of the Royal International Air Tattoo. 배은지, 아리랑 뉴스.
It's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Time magazine has named South Korea's capital of Seoul as one of the 50 greatest places of 2022, naming it the smartest city. It highlighted various aspects of the city's high-tech features like self-driving shuttle buses at Incheon International Airport, air quality improvement devices on public transport and unlimited Wi-Fi service, of course. But more than anything, it emphasized how Seoul is the first city government to integrate with the Metaverse, introducing an even more tech-savvy way of living in the iconic Asian capital. We discussed today what makes Seoul the smartest city on earth and what it's doing to become an even better place to be, charting a path to economic recovery and investing in sustainability, as the Time magazine put it. For this, I'm joined in studio by Andrew Lim, Research and Innovation Attaché at the Government of Quebec in Seoul. Very warm welcome to you, Mr. Lim.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to see you offline. We used to do quite a lot of interviews online, I believe, but nice to be with you in studio. And well, first of all, you've actually worked with Seoul government, on its smart city projects, and now as an innovation expert as well. What features of Seoul City really stood out to you as being a smart city?
Before I start talking about all the cool tech and everything, I think one of the biggest things Seoul government has done is, if you think about Seoul government, it is a public entity, obviously, and they have certain restraints, for example, but still they went beyond the call of duty and they actually started taking risks. And when we look at like Korean government or public sector in general, that could be quite difficult, but still they took the risk and they did a lot of innovative things, such as the Metaverse, which we'll probably talk about later. And some of the really cool things besides taking risks and this kind of a framework is their traffic system. Maybe a lot of the people have heard there's a traffic operations center in the city hall called TOPIS, T-O-P-I-S. The acronym is Traffic Operation Information Center, and it's actually located in the basement of City Hall. So the reason for that is it's kind of made into this bunker system, so that in case some emergency happens, maybe someone attacks or there's an earthquake, they could actually still run Seoul City, within the traffic system and other emergency services inside City Hall for at least like a month or two. So they have like water and food and everything to be able to provide public services even when there's a huge disaster. I think that's like planning really ahead. So these things, that's really impressed me is this kind of system that they know even if there is an emergency, we will be there for the citizens.
Right, and these emergency measures to keep the city smart, stocking up on all that water and ramyeon, I imagine. And well, so there was quite a lot of attention on how Seoul is a smart city. So first, what really are the crucial elements of a smart city?
So smart city, people understand it's probably about tech, that's obvious. But I think one of the biggest thing people do not realize is through smart city, or even before smart city, there's data. And people say, data is the new oil. So there's many ways to gather data. Obviously, there's like IoT sensors, and it could be word of mouth, this kind of stuff. But the crucial thing about smart city is to be able to utilize this data and then make citizens' lives better. For example, maybe there's some air quality sensors around Seoul, I'm sure you know, and they provide fine dust data. And with this kind of data, maybe there's certain regions in Seoul where the fine dust is even worse. So people could look at this data and think about why is this happening, and then mitigate it so that people have fresher air in that area. Maybe it's because there's a lot of cars in that particular area, or a lot of cargo vehicles, and because, for example, the tire traction, there's a lot of pollution. So if they know about this, then they could mitigate it by putting filters or redirecting traffic somewhere else to kind of give people a breath of fresh air. So this kind of data is, I think, very important. But what's even more important is, before doing all these smart city tech stuff, people have to realize smart city is still about people. So it has to be human-centric. It's not about like putting the tech and people will use it, which is somewhat true, but sometimes they may not. Then we could kind of say maybe our tax dollars might have been a bit wasted. So we have to take into consideration human behavior and make it very human-centric. So kind of investigate how people may use this, put capacity building in the forefront, train them so that they know this technology is beneficial, and we get to learn our people are using this, not using it, how can we make it better so that people actually use it for their own benefit.
So it's not just about the hardware, but it's really taking these numbers, this data, and adding value to it, which in turn adds quality to our lives.
Oh, yes.
Well, Seoul City, you mentioned the transportation system, and I want to talk more about that actually. So Seoul really adopted very innovative policies and tools to incorporate various types of mobility solutions together. And now it's looking to take things to the next level, which was also mentioned by the Times Magazine feature. It's looking into air mobility, it's looking into taxi hailing for self-driving vehicles. So does Seoul currently have the capacity to support this kind of system? And is Seoul unique in pursuing these kind of services, or are other cities pursuing this kind of integrated solution as well?
That's actually a very good topic, because I think most metropolises, their biggest problem is traffic. I mean, everyone's complaining about traffic congestion, the pollution of it, and therefore they have public transportation system. But obviously that's not enough, because you can't just move people around through subways or taxis. So Seoul did have a lot of initiative. They started around 2017-18, and they designated an area in Seoul. It's the Sangam area, or there's a subway station called the Digital Media City. It's a bit far away from here, but still they kind of designate that area as kind of the automated vehicle testbed area. So they actually, Seoul Metropolitan Government, they partner with Hyundai, obvious Hyundai Motors. It is one of Korea's biggest companies, and they tested out some of their automated vehicle features. So I think you guys covered it a little bit during the news. The automated vehicle, there is a level of like a system level, like for example 1 to 5. 1 is basically it's not really automated. 5 is full automation. You could probably sleep in the car and it'll be okay. So they're testing it for now they're testing it for a level 3 capacity. So it's kind of automated, but still you have to be in the car, you have to be aware, but it'll still kind of self-drive. And they're hoping to have it to level 4 around 2025, 2027. And this is it's impressive. It's good that Seoul's trying to do this, because like a lot of metropolises, and this is kind of the killer app in smart cities. If you could actually, take a car and not drive and just sleep there or work, that would be a very beneficial thing for everybody, from pollution to congestion to everything. But then the biggest problem of this is the data, actually. Because if you think about it, if you really want cars to be fully automated, it has to take into account all the emergency situations. Maybe a child might pop out somewhere because they're playing with a soccer ball or something, and obviously you don't want to hit a child or anything. But to obtain this kind of data for the car to kind of learn, deep learning, machine learning, all that stuff, you can't like put a child in front and actually do this. That's unethical. So like, typical traffic data is very easy to obtain. You have your car, put your LiDAR and camera and just drive around, that's great. But usually you won't run into those emergency situations. So what some of the new innovation that's come into this automated vehicle area is they utilize something called synthetic data. Maybe you've heard of something like this. So basically what they do is they render a model synthetically into the computer to be able to learn about these emergency situations without really doing it in real life, because there's a risk of hitting a child. But if you put it as a synthetic data, it's not real. But still the AV, the program, the software will see it as real, and they'll be able to learn from this data. So this has been an emerging field. It's still emerging, but this is a crucial component of automated vehicle, because that's the most important thing, safety. You don't want to hit people, you don't want to hit other cars, and these emergency situations, it's not easy to really like have it in real life. Yes.
I see, and well, having lived as a foreign resident in Seoul for a number of years, would you say that many of these digital infrastructural features, they do translate into real life, and you actually feel the impact of these in everyday life?
Yes, actually yes. As a Canadian, as a foreigner, I've been in Korea for some time now. Like, this is kind of smart city, but there's some personal, I guess, digital tech that I've been seeing develop a lot for foreigners. For example, when I first came to Korea like several years ago, foreigners in Korea, we have ID numbers. So do Korean nationals. Yes, alien numbers, yes, you could call it. It used to not work. Because, the Korean national numbers, they're very standardized. It's everyone has it. But foreign alien numbers, as you call it, they start with different numbers, and et cetera. So when you try to register for certain things, like even like neighbor email or Korean services, back in several years ago, it didn't work. As in, it said it was invalid. But then the government realized, there's quite a lot of foreigners in Korea now, maybe around like 1 to 2 million people, and they were having difficulties accessing the digital, public services. So they realized this, and they had consultations, and they finally implemented this. So almost every public system, and because of the public initiative, the private sector also went in and did this too. Like telecom companies, sometimes you weren't able to register for certain apps, et cetera. But now, that's fully in place, which is, I think, quite impressive. Also, some of the other smart city-ish foreign policies that they've also implemented is there's something called the Seoul Global Center. Maybe you've heard of this. It's an initiative actually by the current mayor when he was the mayor back in the late 2000s. He took some data and he realized, hey, we should open these foreign kind of centers to help foreigners acclimate or adapt to Korean culture. And these infrastructure, these buildings, they're placed in places where they obtain the data to see where foreigners live, and they put it in very convenient locations. So they use data, and I think smart cities, this is what smart cities is about. Tech, IoT, all that stuff, but to make lives better for people. Wow. So I actually visited some of these centers. Some of them do visa processing, for example, so you could go online and actually reserve now. Before you had to call or IDs didn't work, but now it works. So I think this is I know it's kind of minor, but it's very personal to me. So this is a very successful case.
Hopefully we'll see that data being used to provide more customizable services to our foreign residents as well. And now Seoul is the first city government to integrate with the Metaverse, as was pointed out by the Time article. And really, when we hear about the Metaverse, perhaps for people like me, it still sounds like a bit of a buzzword. So is there anything really concrete to this? Is it really going to help the city become even smarter, basically?
Yes, so Metaverse, I think some of the audiences and people have heard of it, buzzwords like Metaverse, NFT, blockchain. It's come out a lot, and it has to do with smart cities, but quite often, as you mentioned, is it real? Is it just a buzzword? Will it be just around for a short term? Is it a waste of time and money? So there's a lot of these questions, and of course, we don't know the future, in 5-10 years, but I think what's really unique is at least the Seoul government is trying. They're early adopters, they're taking risks, and I think Metaverse, it had its role, especially during the corona pandemic, although we could say it's still kind of happening. So just recently, Seoul launched a initiative called Metaverse Seoul. Yes, original name, but still, yes, Metaverse Seoul. And what they did is basically they want to, and they're doing it right now, they're putting many of their public services into the Metaverse. So for example, if you wanted to have some license printed about yourself, you maybe just go on the web, put your ID and just get it this way. But now they could try to actually go into the Metaverse, make an avatar of yourself, walk to the actual office digitally, and then even talk to other people there, other citizens, or especially the public servants. Because if you access it through online, yes, you could. There's some chat feature sometimes, but it feels very disconnected. But now they could actually go online and actually get public services, and there are disadvantages because yes, in person may be the best, but if you go through the Metaverse, maybe you don't have to, take your car, reduce traffic congestion, reduce pollution, etc. So there's a lot of advantages, but you're right, still somewhat in the early stages. But I know Seoul is taking the forefront in this. They were recently invited to an MIT event, actually, and the Director General of Smart Cities Division, he went and he presented it, and he's actually looking for a lot of collaboration internationally. Obviously, it's good to promote these things, but then Seoul is great, but you always have to work together with other people to see the flaws and the benefits and make it something tangible so that people could actually use it, although they are kind of using it. But if I had to say what is the metaverse, right now it's getting along, but maybe you saw some movies called like Ready Player One or Surrogate by Bruce Willis. I think this is a true metaverse, and people know this, but we're somewhat ways away, but at least we're getting there, and I think this is what makes it really unique. We're trying.
I think a couple of years ago, maybe in 2020, we saw Samsung launch AI humans and ventures like that, bringing AI or avatars into everyday life and having them consult in a sense. So having public servants or providing public services through these kind of metaverse features, maybe they will become more personable than what we currently experience, given all the red tape and the bureaucratic sort of headaches that we go through on a daily basis. But well, as Seoul and other cities become more and more digitalized, it looks like they're going to have to include more people, become more inclusive, and also cities are looking to cooperate as well. So what are some areas of cooperation that you see between Seoul and also Quebec?
No, good question. So as you mentioned, smart city innovation tech, Korea is very innovative, but still you cannot do it alone because, you know, other cultures, other ethnicities, they have different ideas, they have different way of doing things, and that brings about a lot of this conglomerate effect, as in it gives a lot of advantages. So actually, I went to on a business trip to Canada, Quebec recently, and we signed a lot of new agreements. So for example, there's a lot of commonality between Quebec and Korea. For example, they both, I guess, suffer from I guess we call it the elderly problems. For example, birth rates, but also through Corona, we realized the elderly are very vulnerable. You know, old folks' homes, these places, it was quite ravaged by Corona and all that. So both governments realized, hey, we need to do something to help these elderly people, you know, bridge the digital divide, but also help them with health. So we actually recently concluded an agreement with an entity called the Seoul Digital Foundation, and in Quebec, an entity called MedTech. They actually came together, we met them, we signed an agreement to do some joint research and do programs on age technology. So for example, it could be something like, you know, some IoT sensor in an elderly person's home to see if they are moving. Something like this, or a sensor in their rice cooker, so that if they use it regularly, we know they're okay. But maybe they haven't used it for a while. Then it'll alert the public officials in that district, and they will actually give them a call to see if they're okay. And if they're not picking up, they may pay a visit just to check they're not like unconscious somewhere, things like this. So we are working on these kind of technology to put in budget together and kind of do a call for application. So startups and companies and citizens with ideas will, you know, come up with good ideas, and we'll pick them and help them innovate, and we'll try to use and implement that technology in our everyday lives to help the elderly. So there's actually a lot of exciting things going on.
All right, it does sound incredibly exciting, and then as Seoul continues to move forth in its smart city ventures, hopefully there'll be room for more collaboration as well to make society really smarter, more digitized, and obviously more inclusive and livable as well. So, well, thank you very much for your time today, Mr. Andrew Lim, Research and Innovation Attaché at the Quebec government in Seoul.
Yes, thank you for having me.
South Korean culture has been growing in global appeal in various areas, including music, drama and movies. But surprisingly, we've yet to see a Korean Disney character. However, this might change after one Korean American decided to take matters into her own hands. Our Song Yoo-jin met the artist and files us this report.
There was no Korean Disney princess, so I decided to make my own.
The fish in the sea can't stop me. All of the waves in the world can't rock me.
With the snap of a finger, a Disney-style character wearing a Korean traditional hanbok pops out and sings. It's the work of Julia Ryu, a Korean-American composer and writer. Back in January, the 22-year-old uploaded this clip of her singing a tune from her original musical, Simcheong, to social media. Based on the Korean folktale Simcheongjeon, it shows the journey of Simcheong, who finds herself in a magical kingdom after diving into the sea to save her blind father. The video has garnered over 1 million views in less than a month. Then, how did this all start? I got a chance to speak with Julia Ryu during her visit to Korea last week. Growing up in Missouri, Ryu saw herself more as a sidekick than a main character, as she barely saw Koreans on screen or on stage. But she wanted this to change.
And so I think wanting to contribute to that feeling for the next generation of kids, to be able to see themselves in something as widespread as Disney, as celebrated and uplifting and well-known as Disney, I think would not only help those kids be able to see themselves as a lead character, but also would help other people to be able to see us, Koreans, as lead characters as well.
The opportunity came when she decided to unite her root culture with musical theater for her senior thesis project at Harvard, where she studied theater, dance, media, and music. But why Simcheong in particular?
So I think the reason that I first connected with the folktale originally is that it is this story about a young woman who is looking to return home and to reconnect with her family. And at the time that I first started writing Simcheong, I was, I think, harboring a deep question, and really since I was young, of who am I, where do I belong?
After her video went viral, Ryu was showered with messages from the Korean and Korean American community saying they felt the same way growing up and hope to see a Korean Disney princess soon. But she dreams big.
My ultimate dream is to be able to help contribute to a movement of cultural understanding and diversity and empathy in the theater, music, and film space.
To help make her dream become reality, Ryu will soon move to New York, the heart of the entertainment industry, to work on more productions, which of course includes continuing to develop Simcheong. 송유진, Arirang News.
For a look at news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning to you guys.
Let's begin with Sri Lanka, where the acting president has declared a state of emergency.
Well, that's right, Doyon. Coming amid fresh protests, acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe made the declaration on Monday amid growing calls for him to resign. Now, the decree allows the acting president to authorize detentions, seize property and search any premises. He can also alter or suspend any law. Now, the move was made 2 days before Sri Lankan lawmakers choose a new president as they work on forming a unity government. This comes after former leader Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled the country and stepped down following months of anti-government protests in the wake of an economic crisis. Wickremesinghe, who was Prime Minister under Rajapaksa before becoming acting president, said on Monday that Sri Lanka is close to negotiating a bailout from the International Monetary Fund. He added that steps are also being taken to address fuel and cooking gas shortages. In the US, there have been updates in the trials of both the Parklands and Buffalo shooters. Now, the Parklands case saw prosecutors on Monday call for jurors to sentence the gunman to death. This after Nicholas Cruz pleaded guilty in October to killing 17 people in a mass shooting at Florida's Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parklands in 2018. He now faces a jury that will decide whether he gets a life sentence or the death penalty. Meanwhile, Peyton Gendron, the man accused of killing 10 black people at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York, has pleaded not guilty to charges of 14 hate crimes and 13 firearms offenses. Despite a stop on federal executions last year, Attorney General Merrick Garland has not ruled out seeking the death penalty should Gendron be found guilty. In Ghana, 2 cases have been confirmed of the highly infectious Marburg virus. The official confirmation came Sunday after 2 people who tested positive for the virus died earlier this month. Ghana Health Services have said they are working to reduce the spread of the virus by isolating those who have been known to have had contact. The confirmation makes this the second such outbreak in West Africa, with the first occurring last year in Guinea. The World Health Organization says fertility rates for the virus have varied from 24% to 88% in previous outbreaks. The virus is transmitted to people from fruit bats, spreading among humans through contact with bodily fluids. And finally, dangling from dizzying heights, participants from around the world gathered for the world's first ever Highline World Championships. Now taking place from July 15th to the 17th in Laax, Switzerland, 24 men and 7 women performed tricks and crossed slack lines at the summit of Krapsong-jeon, sub 2,250 meters above sea level. David Hermes of the US was named the winner in the men's freestyle category, while France's Louise Lenoble won in the women's event. The freestyle section gave participants access to 3 separate lines, each spanning 65 meters with varying degrees of tension.
Good morning. Yesterday's heavy monsoon rain in South gave much-needed drought relief to southern parts of the country, not to mention southern regions were dealing with the worst drought since 1973. And that rain also gave heat relief to the south. Now the rain has let up, the heat will move in again, and those in the south will notice afternoon highs going 5 to 11 degrees higher than on Monday. And along with blistering temperatures, sunshine will be quite strong with very high UV rays across Korea. Southern parts of Jeju and Jindo in Jeollanam-do province will have extreme levels, and excessive sun exposure can cause damage to the skin, eyes, so please take well care. Most regions were tropical night free except in parts of Jeju Island again. And highs will be similar to yesterday in the capital region, but those in south again need to brace for scorching heat. Meanwhile, there is a slim chance of passing rain in upper regions. Now, monsoon rain returns at the end of the week and weekend, while the capital region will have a bearable heat wave. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe. That wraps up our newscast for this hour. We'll be back tomorrow for our Wednesday edition of Nidae Arirang.
Thanks for joining us this morning, and do tune in to Arirang News for updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are. Take care.